My name is Catherine Monroe. I'm 67 years old. I was a school librarian for 38 years, a mother for 44, and a wife until the night cancer took Frank from me. People often say I have a calm face. Maybe it's from all the years teaching children how to whisper, how to wait their turn. Maybe it's from spending a lifetime folding pain into silence, like laundry into drawers. But that morning, 3 months ago, I wasn't calm. I was shaking. I was sitting at this very kitchen table, alone, with a cup of chamomile tea gone cold, and a crumpled lottery ticket in my hand. 6 numbers, all matched. $62 million. After taxes, it would still be more money than I'd ever imagined holding. I looked around this little house. The chipped cabinets, the squeaky floorboard near the fridge, the garden Frank once kept alive. The only thing that moved was the ticking wall clock, and my hands, trembling over that small slip of paper. That should have been the happiest moment of my life, but all I felt was dread. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even smile. Instead, I remembered something Evelyn once said to me. Evelyn, Frank's aunt, the only person who ever truly saw me. Years ago, when Frank was dying and I was drowning in hospital bills, she pressed a check into my palm. $200, all she had. And she said, "Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shares your burdens." That night, not one of my children called. My son David was too busy raising capital. My daughter Melissa was redecorating her condo in Miami. My sister Clara was somewhere between a yoga retreat and a new online course. None of them knew I was sleeping beside an unpaid electric bill, or that the house nearly went into foreclosure. And I never told them. So when I won the lottery, I made one decision. I wouldn't tell a soul. Not yet. Because I needed to know, not what they'd do if I had something to give, but what they'd do if I had nothing left. I wanted to see who would come if I said I was sinking. So I tested them. I picked up the phone, one by one, and told each of them the same story. I'd lost most of my retirement in a failed investment. The house was in danger. I just needed a little help. $7,000. A fraction of what I'd given them through the years. Not a fortune. Not impossible. Just enough to see who they were when the roles were reversed. And the results? They answered. Each with a reason, each with a no. All except one. Only one person reached out to me. And no, it wasn't David. It wasn't Melissa. It wasn't even Clara, the sister who once swore she'd always be there after Frank died. It was Evelyn, 82 years old, living on a small pension. Still sends me birthday cards with bird stickers on the envelope. She didn't ask how much. She didn't hesitate. She just said, "Sweetheart, I can send you 3,000. That's all I have, but you need it more than I do." That was the moment I knew. Money reveals the truth. It doesn't change people. It exposes them. I kept quiet about the winnings, but I started writing. Notes. Observations. Memories I wish I could forget. And slowly, I stitched together the kind of story I never thought I'd live to tell. This isn't a story about a lottery win. This isn't about revenge. It's about clarity. It's about what happens when a woman stops being everyone's safety net and starts asking where her own landed. It's about what we lose when we give without asking, and what we find when we finally do. I know this might sound cold, but I promise you, what I did next came not from cruelty, but from need. A quiet need for the truth, no matter how bitter it tasted. I won $62 million in the lottery, but kept it secret. Then I asked my family for help. just to see. Only one person reached out to me. The story I'm about to tell might make you angry. It might make you think of your own mother. Or maybe it'll make you wonder if you've ever ignored someone who once held you together. All I ask is that you listen. Because this story isn't just mine. And by the end, you might find yourself asking the very same question I did. If it were you, what would you have done? I live in the same house Frank and I bought when David was still in diapers, and Melissa was just a thought in the back of my mind. The paint's faded now, and the steps creak like old bones, but it's home. The walls still hold whispers of laughter, arguments, bedtime stories, and grief. So much grief. It's not much, just a one-story house with a struggling garden out front and a porch swing that's been broken since the winter Frank passed. But it's full of the only kind of riches I'd ever known. Memories. His toolbox still sits in the shed. His boots by the back door. His favorite coffee mug, chipped on the rim, still holds pencils by the kitchen phone. I've kept the place as it was. Not because I'm stuck in the past, but because it's the only place where I can still feel him breathe. I was the glue, the kind that holds without being seen. Frank worked, I raised the children. I packed lunches, ironed shirts, stitched Halloween costumes by hand. When David broke his arm at 14, I slept in a chair next to his bed for a week. When Melissa got chickenpox, I canceled my only weekend away in 10 years. I was the one who remembered birthdays, wrote thank you notes, and stocked the medicine cabinet with Band-Aids and hope. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person. I became a service. David, my firstborn, is 42 now, ambitious, sharp, always chasing the next deal. He calls me Mom, the way people say, Alexa, like a button to press for results. I once overheard him tell a friend, "My mom? She's solid. You can always count on her to help you out." And he meant it as praise, as if being useful was the height of affection. Melissa is all charm, warm smiles, soft hands, expensive perfume. She's the kind who remembers to send flowers on Mother's Day, but they're always late, always with the wrong card. Her life's about appearances. Her love comes in neatly packaged compliments that melt away the moment you turn around. I've loaned her money more than I can count. Not once has she offered to pay it back. She thanks me with Instagram posts, grateful for the strong women who raised me. I'm tagged. That's supposed to be enough. Then there's Clara, my younger sister. A wild heart who never quite settled down. She's borrowed from me so often it became a silent tradition. 500 here, 1,000 there, always with a promise, always with a sigh. I never asked again. I just learned to live with her vanishing acts. But Evelyn is different. She's Frank's aunt, now 82, with silver hair that still glows like moonlight, and a mind sharp enough to slice through nonsense. She lives in a small apartment down the road, surrounded by porcelain birds and old gospel records. We have tea every Thursday. She's the only one who ever looks into my eyes and actually sees me. Evelyn was the one who told me, not long after Frank passed, "You spent your whole life pouring into others, darling. You need someone who pours back." That stayed with me, like a seed I didn't know had been planted. It bloomed the day I won the lottery. And then there's Tom Harris, my neighbor for over 30 years. A retired police officer who spends his mornings watering his tomatoes and his evenings playing chess with himself on the porch. He's the kind of man who speaks softly and carries nothing but kindness. Frank trusted him. I trust him too. A few weeks ago, Tom stopped by with a basket of apples from his yard. He found me sitting by the window, holding the unpaid gas bill. I must have looked hollow because he sat down and said, "Catherine, you've carried everyone for so long. You forgot how to stand for yourself." That line, simple as it was, made something shift inside me. These people in my life, some take, some see, some remind me of who I was and who I still might be. And as I sat in this house, surrounded by relics of a life that once felt whole, I realized maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to keep pretending that being invisible was the same thing as being loved. And so, with $62 million in a folded envelope and silence in every room, I decided to set the stage. To see not just who would take care of me, but who even remembered how. Frank had always been the strong one. A carpenter by trade, but more than that, a builder of dreams. He had a laugh that filled every room and hands that could fix anything except, as it turned out, himself. When the diagnosis came, stage 4, pancreatic cancer, it felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under us. I remember sitting in the sterile white doctor's office, clutching Frank's hand as if I could tether him to life just by not letting go. But cancer doesn't listen to love. It takes and takes. We did everything we could. Treatments, trials, special diets, alternative therapies. But none of it came cheap. Our insurance covered some of the basics, but the rest? It was on us. So I sold my grandmother's wedding ring, the one she'd passed down to me on my wedding day with trembling hands and teary eyes. I sold Frank's prized coin collection he'd spent decades curating. I even sold the antique armoire in the guest room, the one he built me for our 25th anniversary, the one with the tiny initials carved inside the drawer, F+K equals always. When that wasn't enough, I started borrowing. I asked David first. He said he was tied up in a new investment and couldn't liquidate funds. He offered a lukewarm, "good luck, Mom," before returning to his Bluetooth call. Melissa was next. She looked genuinely pained for about 30 seconds before sighing about daycare costs and the new HVAC system. She told me she'd pray. I never got $1. Clara didn't even answer my calls. She texted back 3 days later with a vague excuse about being off the grid for self-care. I needed her, and she disappeared. Only Evelyn came through. Quiet, consistent Evelyn. She showed up one rainy morning with $200 in an envelope and 2 hands that held mine like they remembered what it was to break. "It's not much," she whispered, "but it's what I have." I cried harder for that than anything else. Not because of the money, but because of the gesture. It meant I wasn't completely alone in the storm. Frank passed 6 weeks later. In the end, it wasn't the cancer that broke me. It was watching him apologize for being sick, for costing so much, for leaving me behind. He died with a whisper on his lips. "I'm sorry, Katie." As if love owed an apology. The funeral was simple, paid for with what little remained from our savings. David arrived late, left early. Melissa brought a casserole and a social media post. Clara sent a card 2 weeks late with a pressed flower inside. Not a word of real comfort. Not a dime of help. That winter, I went without heat for 3 weeks. I boiled water to pour into the tub just to take a warm bath. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want pity, or worse, empty promises. I stitched quilts to sell on Etsy, babysat the neighbor's kid when I could, and clipped coupons like it was a second job. But something inside me changed. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. I realized that grief stripped away everything false. And what it left behind was truth. Cold, clear, and sharp as broken glass. I had spent my whole life being dependable, selfless, strong. And in the one moment I truly needed someone, all I heard was the echo of my own footsteps trying to keep going. So when I scratched that lottery ticket in the corner store 2 years later, just out of boredom really, and saw the numbers line up like destiny itself was finally listening, I didn't scream. I didn't dance. I just sat very still. My fingers trembled. My breath caught. $62 million. And the first thought that came to me, don't tell a soul, because I needed to know, not who loved the money, but who still remembered me when they thought I had nothing left. That memory of Frank in the hospital, of my children's excuses, of Evelyn's warm $200, burned in the back of my mind like a scar I could run my fingers over, but never smooth out. This wasn't about revenge, not in the loud, movie kind of way. It was something quieter, more surgical. I needed to see them, truly see them, unmasked. Would they call to check in? Would they stop by just to share a moment? Would they still see me as mom? Or only as a missed opportunity? So I folded the ticket and tucked it into an old recipe book. And I started the most important experiment of my life. Not to punish, but to understand. Because before I left this earth, I needed to answer one final question. Did they ever see me? Or did they only ever see what I gave them? It started with a notebook. Not a fancy one. Just a soft brown, leather-bound journal I'd once bought at a garage sale for 50 cents. I hadn't known what I'd use it for at the time, but I remember thinking it felt like something meant to hold truth. And now, it would. I titled the first page, Who They Really Are. Beneath it, I wrote 3 columns: name, response, outcome. Then, I stared at the blank page for a long time, feeling something unfamiliar rising inside me. Not bitterness. No, I didn't have room left for that. It was resolve. If they had loved me when I had nothing, then they'd surely stand by me now, right? So I made a plan. I'd start with a story, one that wasn't so far from the truth. I'd tell them I was behind on property taxes, that the bank was breathing down my neck, and that I might lose the house. I wouldn't ask for anything outright. I'd simply share and wait. And with each encounter, I'd write in that notebook: David, Melissa, Clara, even Evelyn. I'd test them all. In the quiet of my kitchen, I practiced what I'd say, how I'd say it. I even rehearsed my pauses. I needed them to believe it. Needed to sound weary, not wounded, defeated, but not desperate. Then, I pulled out the old photo album from the cabinet above the fridge. It was covered in dust. I hadn't touched it in years. Not since Frank died. I sat at the table and turned the pages slowly. There was our wedding photo. Black and white, slightly faded. Frank had a full head of hair and eyes that sparkled with mischief. I was smiling so wide my cheeks looked sore. We were young, brave, stupid with hope. Another page. Birthdays, camping trips, Thanksgiving dinners. David with cake on his nose at age 5. Melissa in a fairy costume twirling under the porch light. Even Clara, back when she was sweet and full of freckles, hugging a puppy on the lawn. Page after page of love. So much laughter in those images. So much life. But as I looked around the room I sat in now, the silence pressed heavy on my chest. The chairs were empty. The laughter long gone. The only sound was the ticking of the clock and the distant hum of the fridge. It wasn't just a house I might lose. It was a museum of memories, a temple built from decades of caring, and not one of them had stepped inside in months. I glanced back at the album, at Frank, holding baby Melissa with the gentlest hands I'd ever seen, at me, stirring soup with Clara standing on a stool beside me, at David, proudly showing off a wooden birdhouse we built together in the garage. Where did that warmth go? I closed the album and set it beside the notebook. One held the past, the other my present experiment, one full of smiles, the other waiting for truths. And then I wrote, David called, told him about financial troubles. No offer. Changed subject to his crypto portfolio. Outcome? Revealed. Melissa, scheduled coffee. Listened, suggested I sell jewelry or maybe Airbnb a room. Said she was spread thin. Outcome, revealed Clara, texted. Said she was meditating for abundance and avoiding negativity. Outcome, revealed. Evelyn, not yet contacted, saving her for last. I traced my fingers over the ink, letting the reality settle. This wasn't vengeance. It was clarity in ink. For years, I'd poured everything into this family. Every meal, every favor, every dollar. And now I needed nothing. Not from them. I just needed to know. The notebook sat open as I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea, watching the steam rise like a prayer I hadn't yet spoken. Tomorrow, the testing would begin in earnest. But tonight, I would sit with the ghosts of who we once were, and the stillness of who we had become. Sometimes the only way to heal is to first uncover what's broken. I started with Melissa. It wasn't a random choice. She was the gentlest of the three, at least in how she spoke. David was too brash, Clara too slippery. But Melissa always wrapped her refusals in silk. I dialed her number just after lunch. I knew she'd be on break from teaching at the community college. She picked up on the third ring. Hi, Mom. Everything okay? Her voice was sweet, airy, like a scented candle flickering through the phone. I swallowed. I didn't mean to bother you, sweetheart. Just thought I'd check in. That's not like you. Is something wrong? I let a pause stretch, long enough for her to lean in, emotionally. I got a letter from the county. Property taxes are overdue. A few months behind, actually. I may have made a mistake, miscalculated something. The penalties stacked up faster than I expected. She was quiet. Then a sharp inhale, performed concern. Oh no, that's not good. I'll manage, I added quickly. I always do. Another pause. I could hear the click of her pen on the desk. She was thinking, calculating. Well, she said slowly, you know Jason and I are still paying off Lily's braces, and college apps are coming up for Sam, and this inflation, groceries are just wild these days. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Of course, I understand. If you can just hold off until maybe, I don't know, March? We'll have our tax return by then. Maybe we can help a little. Not a lot, but something. She was always good at giving crumbs, wrapped in kindness. It's okay, I said, gently. It's just a house. I just needed someone to talk to about it. She let out a small breath of relief, like she'd escaped something. You know I'm always here for you, Mom. Emotionally, I mean. You're strong. You'll figure it out like you always do. I thanked her, told her I loved her. She replied in kind. Then we hung up. I sat for a moment, phone still in hand, staring at the soft light outside the kitchen window. The camellia bush was in bloom. It used to be her favorite flower. I pulled the notebook close and opened to the page titled, Who They Really Are. Under Melissa's name, I wrote, Loingot Ningao, Nhung Trong Rong. Sweet voice, empty hands. I closed my eyes and let the silence deepen. My tea had gone cold again. It's strange, the things that come back to you. When Melissa was little, maybe 5, she used to grip my hand so tightly in public, as if the world would swallow her whole if she let go. She was afraid of escalators, loud buses, even mall Santas. But my hand was her anchor. She'd whisper, "Don't let go, Mama," even as a teenager, half joking when we'd cross a street. She used to believe I was her safety net, but somewhere along the way, that hand stopped reaching for mine. Not in anger, not even in rejection. It just withdrew. Gradually, politely. The last time she held my hand, really held it, was at Frank's funeral. I remember because her palm was warm, and her thumb kept brushing over mine like she was trying to soothe me without saying anything. Since then, it's been air kisses, birthday texts, and "we should do brunch soon." And now, when I said I might lose the house, she gave me a future maybe. March, after taxes, if possible, but no hand, no warmth, no anchor. I stared at the phone for a long time, as if hoping she'd call back, say she was just being cautious, say she was on her way. But the screen stayed black, and the silence stayed loud. This wasn't a test for her. It was for me. To see how much I'd hoped. To see what I'd been clinging to. I closed the notebook slowly and placed it beside the photo album. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. But something inside me settled. Not in a peaceful way, but in a grounded way. Like a stone finding its place in the riverbed after years of tumbling. Melissa had spoken, and I had heard her. Now it was time to listen to the others. David picked up on the second ring. "What's up, Mom? Make it quick. I've got a client coming in 10. "No, how are you?" No softness, just business. I could hear typing in the background, the faint clinking of a coffee mug, and someone speaking loudly on speakerphone. His world was always in motion. Mine had long ago slowed to stillness. "I won't take much of your time," I said, calm and even. "I just needed to ask. I may need some help. Financially." A pause. Then a sigh. "How much?" I hesitated, then said it. 7,000. He whistled low, a sound that was more judgment than surprise. 7,000 for what? Property taxes. I let it slide too long. They're threatening foreclosure. Another pause, but this one came with tension. I could almost see him lean back in his chair, rubbing his temple in frustration. "Mom, you're what? 67? You should know how to manage your finances by now." I didn't say anything, just let the words hang in the air. "You live in that house alone," he continued, voice rising. "You don't travel. You don't shop. Where the hell's all your money going? You've had that house for decades. Paid off, no? You're telling me you couldn't put aside enough to cover basic taxes?" Again, I said nothing. He let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Unbelievable. "You know what I think? You spoiled Melissa and Clara so long, now you expect a bailout when things get tight." Still, I remained quiet. That silence seemed to unnerve him. "You know what, Mom? I'm not trying to be the bad guy here, but you gotta stop running to your kids every time life slaps you. You're not helpless." I didn't say I was. I said quietly. "Good," he snapped. "Because I can't help you. Not right now. Things are tight, business is rocky, and I've got responsibilities of my own." "Sorry." I waited for something else. Anything. A breath of regret, a flicker of warmth. But he just added, "Look, I gotta go. Take care of yourself, all right? And hung up before I could even say goodbye. I stared at the phone for a long time. The silence afterward wasn't quiet. It was echoing, bruising. I reached for the notebook. The page with his name was still blank. David Monroe. Chi Trish. Tu Choi. Blame. No help. That was all it took. I leaned back in the chair and let the memory roll in. Uninvited, but vivid. It was a winter morning, maybe 10 years ago. David had come to the house, pacing the kitchen floor in that same agitated energy he carried now. He was 34, fired up about a new startup. "It's the next wave," he said. "Digital logistics consulting. No one's tapped into it properly yet." He needed $18,000. I had only $9,000 in savings and a few small CDs. I cashed them all out within 24 hours and took a short-term loan on top of it. He said he'd pay it back by the end of the year. He never did. I never asked. I didn't do it for repayment. I did it because he was my son and he believed in something, and I wanted him to feel I believed in him too. Back then, when I handed him that check, his hands trembled. "You're the only one who ever backs me up without hesitation, Mom," he said, hugging me hard. That hug. It's been missing for a while now. What's funny is, I never needed the money back. I just wanted to be remembered as someone who gave when it mattered most. Today, I needed far less than I gave that winter. And all I received in return was a lecture on responsibility. I looked around the living room, the same one he'd once sprawled in after soccer games, cleats tossed aside, snacking on cereal straight from the box. He was always hungry then, physically, emotionally, constantly needing praise, assurance, love. I fed him all of it. But now I knew what he hungered for. And it wasn't connection. It was distance. A clean break from obligation. A sanitized memory of the good son untethered by messy present needs. I pressed the notebook shut gently, like closing a door. That conversation didn't hurt as much as it confirmed what I already feared. He had shown me who he was. Again. And this time, I wouldn't cover it up with excuses. One call left me hollow. This one left me clear. 2 down. 2 more to go. Clara answered with her usual bubbly tone, like we were 2 college girls chatting about nothing over iced tea. "Kathy, oh my goodness, it's been ages. I was just thinking about calling you." That was a lie. Clara never called unless she needed something, usually money, or a reference for another rent application, or someone to co-sign a loan. I forced a small laugh. "Well, I beat you to it then. So, what's up?" "Everything all right?" she asked, sounding cheerful and breathless, like she was halfway between a yoga class and a wine tasting. I hesitated, then began carefully. "Actually, I'm in a bit of a bind. The property taxes on the house got away from me. I'm short. I need about $7,000. If I don't catch up soon, the bank might take the house." There was a beat of silence on the other end. Just a beat. Then came the familiar Clara speak. "Oh, honey, I wish I could help, truly. But things are so tight right now. You wouldn't believe the bills piling up. Credit cards, car repairs, you know how it is. I just had to fix the transmission on the Kia and, oh, Jeremy chipped a tooth at school last week. Dental isn't covering it." I waited. I didn't interrupt. She continued. "And I'm still trying to pay off that loan from, well, you remember. That business, thing that didn't work out. Total scam. I'm still digging out of that hole." Yes, I remembered. I remembered signing the check. She lowered her voice, suddenly reverent. "But I'll be praying for you, Kathy. Every night. I'll light a candle at St. Agnes and ask for strength and support to come your way. Miracles happen, you know. God provides. A pause. A soft sigh from me. Prayer's always appreciated, I said evenly. But cash is what the bank accepts. She chuckled, like I'd made a joke. You're still sharp as ever. I didn't laugh. She filled the silence quickly. Look, maybe if things shift next month or so, I could send a little something. Just not 7,000. That's like a mountain right now. I understand. I mean it, she added too eagerly. I really do care. I'll keep you in my thoughts. That phrase, so easy, so empty. You've always been generous, she went on, words tumbling now, and it breaks my heart to hear you struggling. I wish I could do more. Honestly, I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach through the phone and shake her memory, remind her of every time I bailed her out, every time I gave without conditions. Rent, tuition, a used car, bail money. Just until I get on my feet, Kathy, she always said. But her feet never seemed to stay planted anywhere for long. This time, I didn't press. I didn't ask for timelines or reminders. I simply ended it. Well, thanks for listening, I said quietly. Take care of yourself. You too, sis. And don't worry, God's watching over you. I hung up before I let the bitterness slip into my voice. I sat at the kitchen table, my tea now cold, and reached for the notebook. Clara Monroe. Loi Hua Rong. Kong Han Jong. Empty promises. No action. I underlined it twice. My eyes drifted to the window, where wind stirred the fading flowers in Frank's old planter box. I remembered when Clara used to visit him, bringing cheap grocery store cookies and staying just long enough to ask for something. She cried at his funeral, but she also asked for gas money on the way out. That night, I stared at the ceiling fan above my bed and whispered to no one. Kao Nguyen Rehon Niu, so voi viek tralain hung giem no. And for the first time, I truly meant it. 3 calls, 3 truths. I didn't need their help. I needed to know who they were when I had nothing left to give. And now I did. I called Evelyn last. Not because I expected anything. She was 82, on a fixed income, and her hands trembled just holding a teacup. But because something in me needed to hear her voice. To hear the tone of someone who remembered who I used to be before life made me question it. The phone rang 3 times before I heard her gentle voice. Hello? Catherine? Is that you, dear? Her voice always carried warmth, like old quilts and rose water. I swallowed hard before answering. Yes, it's me, Aunt Evelyn. Oh, sweetheart, you all right? I paused, the lump in my throat heavier than I expected. I need to ask you something, and please don't feel pressured. There was a rustling on her end, like she was settling herself down. Then came her steady, fragile voice. Ask away, honey. We're family. I exhaled slowly. The bank's threatening foreclosure. I'm behind on the property taxes. I need about $7,000 to keep the house. I've tried, but things got tight after Frank passed. I've already sold everything I could. A few seconds of silence followed, not the kind filled with excuses. Just quiet, careful consideration. Then Evelyn spoke, a bit firmer. Well, I don't have 7, but I can send 3. Right now. I'll go to the credit union first thing in the morning. I blinked. $3,000. That was more than I imagined she could spare. She had arthritis, a leaking roof, 1,000 reasons to say no. Evelyn, that's too much. I didn't call expecting anything from you. I just... Hush now, she interrupted, her voice trembling but sure. I know what it's like to lose the roof over your head. I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning and no one even notices the water's rising. Family is supposed to notice. Family is supposed to throw the rope. I felt my lips tremble. My eyes stung. But you need that money, I whispered. And you need a home, she said simply. I'll manage. I always do. You gave so much to this family, Catherine. Maybe they forgot. I didn't. I bit down on my lip to stop the sob from escaping. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just held the phone and let her voice wrap around me like a soft blanket. You were always the strong one, she added. But strong doesn't mean alone. I closed my eyes. A tear slipped down my cheek. I'm sorry, I finally whispered. For what, dear? For not calling sooner. For thinking you were too old to carry any weight for me. Evelyn chuckled softly. Well, these bones are old, but my heart still works just fine. Let me help. That's what love does. I scribbled quietly into my notebook with trembling fingers. Evelyn Monroe, Koit, Chonyu, Kong Chan-chu, gave more than she had, no hesitation. And then finally, I cried. Not the tears of shame or frustration I'd swallowed after the calls with Melissa, David, and Clara. These were tears of recognition, of gratitude, of being seen. I hung up the phone gently and walked over to the fireplace mantel. Above it sat a photo of me and Frank, taken the summer we finished building the porch together. We looked young, dirt on our faces, joy in our eyes. Did you see that, Frank? I whispered, placing my hand gently on the frame. She still remembers. In Evelyn, I saw what family used to mean. Not obligation, not performance, not a wallet to reach for when it suited them, but love. Simple, instinctual, unmeasured. She became my mirror that day, a reminder that I hadn't imagined it all, that the family I'd once believed in wasn't a complete illusion. She was proof that someone still carried the old code. The one where love didn't have to be earned, tested, or bartered. I sat down beside the fireplace, notebook in my lap, and let myself breathe, really breathe, for the first time in days. Evelyn gave me more than $3,000 that evening. She gave me back my faith. The evening after Evelyn's call, I sat on the porch staring into the dusk. My hands trembled, but not from the cold. There was something raw sitting beneath my ribs, a mix of sorrow and clarity, like someone had wiped the fog from a long-forgotten mirror. I was still holding the notebook, its leather cover worn from my fingers, brushing across it, over and over. The names were there. Melissa, David, Clara, and Evelyn, her name underlined, circled. I hadn't told anyone what I was doing, not really, but I needed to tell someone now, someone who wouldn't dismiss me or try to soften the truth. So I called Tom. Tom Harris had been my neighbor for over 20 years. He was a retired police officer, widowed, and walked with a slight limp from an old line-of-duty injury. But his eyes were sharp as ever, and he had a habit of saying things no one else dared to. He came over 10 minutes later, a thermos of tea in hand. We sat on the porch, just like we had after Frank died. Back then, he'd brought over casseroles and quiet company. Tonight, I needed his honesty. I ran a test, I said after a long silence. Tom raised an eyebrow. A test? I nodded. I told each of them, Melissa, David, Clara, that I was about to lose the house, that I needed help, $7,000. Tom didn't interrupt, just sipped his tea and waited. Evelyn offered $3,000 on the spot. She's 82 and barely gets by. The others gave me excuses. Pretty ones, sharp ones, holy ones. But excuses, all the same. Tom nodded slowly, setting the thermos down. And why'd you run this test? I needed to know. My voice cracked. I needed to know if they saw me, or if I was just a burden, a wallet, a ghost from a time they outgrew. He didn't answer right away. He looked out into the yard, where the porch light barely reached the edge of the rose bushes. Finally, he said, "You're not wrong for wanting to see clearly." Most people live their whole lives pretending not to. That made me bite my lip. I waited for the judgment, for him to tell me I was cruel, or paranoid, or bitter. But instead, he said something softer. "When you get evidence like that," he continued, "when you run a test and the mask comes off, you see the truth. But Catherine, truth isn't always meant to fix others. Sometimes it's there, just to free you." I frowned. "Free me?" He turned toward me. "Look, when I was still a cop, we used to say, don't go into a house hoping someone changed. Go in knowing what they were last time and plan for worse. Doesn't mean you stop caring, just means you stop walking in blind." I looked down at my notebook. "So, what do I do with this?" Tom leaned back in his chair. "You accept it. You grieve it if you have to. But don't expect them to become someone they're not, just because now you see them clearly. That's the trap." I swallowed hard. Then what? Then you change what you expect of them. You stop measuring your worth by how they show up. You build new rules, new boundaries. You stop twisting into knots, hoping they'll remember who you were when you gave them everything. His words landed heavy, but not cruel. They were weighty, like stones placed to hold down the corners of a tarp in a storm, meant to keep me steady, not bury me. "Clarity," he added, "isn't always comfortable, but it's the only kind of truth that gives you peace." I nodded slowly. "It still hurts." "Of course it does. Seeing clearly always does at first." We sat in silence again, the wind rustling the porch screen. Then he added, "But Catherine, you did something most people don't dare to. You looked. Now the question is, what are you going to do with what you saw?" I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt like I could breathe. I closed the notebook, not to hide it, but to prepare for what came next. The ache in my chest wasn't just grief anymore. It was awareness. And awareness, Tom reminded me, was the first step toward healing. They came like vultures sensing vulnerability. David arrived first, in his suit and Bluetooth earpiece, like he had somewhere more important to be. Melissa followed, perfume strong, her eyes darting as though expecting news she could package into a future decision. Clara, last as always, parked on the curb and strutted in with the air of someone ready to feign concern. I had arranged the living room as simply as I could. No tea, no snacks, no comfort. Just the wooden coffee table, 3 chairs for them, and mine at the head, where Frank used to sit for Sunday dinners. They assumed I had summoned them for help, or desperation. Maybe to sign something over, maybe to cry. They looked at each other with the kind of tension people carry when they want to be the first to claim a drowning inheritance. "Mom," David started adjusting his watch. "We should talk frankly. If this house is really in danger, I can move some things around. Maybe I can put it under my name, just temporarily for legal protection." Melissa nodded. "It might be time to consider downsizing. Or a retirement community. I toured one last week. It was really lovely. They had bingo nights." Clara gave a half laugh. "Catherine, maybe it's just time you lived within your means. You've always been so generous. Maybe too generous." I said nothing. Instead, I reached under the table and placed the leather-bound notebook in the center. Next to it, a small voice recorder. I pressed play. David's voice crackled through the speaker. At your age, Mom, you should have learned to manage money by now. Click. Melissa's soft tone. Just wait a few months, okay? We've had a lot going on. School fees, insurance, and life. You know? Click. Claire's voice, half laughing. I'll pray for you, sis, but I can't help with money. You know how tight things are. Silence. The kind that suffocates. David's brow furrowed. What is this, Mom? I looked at each of them. Really looked. The lines on their faces I once traced with kisses as babies were now creased with suspicion, with calculation. I ran a little test, I said softly. Told each of you I was about to lose this house. Asked for help. Just once. After years, decades of giving without asking. Melissa folded her arms. So this was a setup? Clara scoffed. You recorded us? That's manipulative. David stood. What's the point of this, Mom? You called us here to shame us? I didn't flinch. Instead, I opened the notebook. The pages were filled with my handwriting. Dates, responses, words like excuse, deflection, justification. And Evelyn's name, circled, starred, written in a shaking hand. Little to give, gave anyway. I called one more person. I said quietly, Evelyn, she's 82. She offered $3,000 without hesitation. Said family must help each other. Their expressions hardened. Why are we really here? David asked, jaw tight. I looked at the three of them, and, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like their mother. I felt like a woman standing on her own 2 feet. I exhaled slowly. Because you should know, I won't be needing to sell the house or move to a retirement home. They blinked. I won't be needing help at all. Melissa squinted. What do you mean? I paused, long enough to feel the weight of the moment settle like dust in sunlight. Then I said it, calmly. I won the lottery. $62 million. Last month. Silence. David leaned forward. Wait, what? I had the ticket for weeks, I continued. I cashed it quietly. And then I ran this test, because I needed to know who you were when you thought I had nothing. Their mouths opened, but no sound came. The room held its breath. Only one person offered help, I said. Only one person picked up the phone with no expectation. And it wasn't any of you. I could feel the temperature shift, not the thermostat, but the air between us. Melissa's jaw tightened. Clara's hands gripped her purse strap. David looked like someone had just taken away a deal he'd already counted as his. I looked at each of them one more time. This isn't revenge. This is clarity, I said. You showed me who you are. I believe you. The silence that followed wasn't angry or shocked. It was empty, hollow, like a building just condemned, waiting to be torn down. That's when I stood. I picked up the recorder, the notebook, and walked out of the room. Behind me, they still hadn't moved. Not to hug me, not to speak, not to apologize. And I didn't wait for them to try. Melissa was the first to react. Her tears came quickly, streaming down her carefully made-up face like mascara was never meant to survive truth. You don't understand, Mom, she choked, voice trembling. It's not that I didn't want to help, we've been barely holding things together. The boys' tuition, the mortgage. I didn't know how bad it was for you. I watched her. I didn't say a word. My silence unnerved her more than any accusation could have. David rose, pacing now like a man cornered in his own illusion. So what was this? A game? You put us through this test? knowing damn well what you were doing? That's sick, Mom." His voice cracked at the end, not with pain, with rage. The kind of rage that came from realizing the power was never his. I held my ground. "No," I said softly. "I didn't put you through anything. I simply asked, and you answered." Clara laughed under her breath. That bitter little sound she used to make when we were kids and someone else got the last cookie. "So what now, Catherine?" she sneered. "You're going to punish your entire family because we didn't throw money at you fast enough?" "I didn't ask for fast," I replied calmly. "I asked for help." "You tested us," David shouted. "Who does that to their children?" I turned to him, not flinching. A mother who needed to know if love only flowed one way. Melissa clutched her chest, shaking her head. "You have no idea what it's like to be pulled in every direction. We're all doing the best we can." "Then say that," I said. "Say you were overwhelmed. Say you felt helpless. But don't twist it now that the money is real." Clara rolled her eyes. "This is rich. You're going to sit there and judge us when you've never once told us you needed anything until it was wrapped up like a morality play." I opened the notebook again and held it up. "These are your words. Not my interpretation, not my edits. Just your words, and how they made me feel." David scoffed. "You really think this makes you better than us?" I closed the book. "No," I whispered, "but it makes me free." That word seemed to strike something in them, like I had just revoked an invisible contract we all signed when they were born. The contract where I give and they take, endlessly, silently, without thanks. "You always made us feel guilty," Melissa muttered, voice low, venom creeping back in. "Like we could never do enough to repay you. And now this? A secret lottery test?" "I wasn't asking you to repay me," I said. "I was asking you to show up." Clara leaned forward. "So what now? You write us off? Disown us over a test?" "I'm not disowning anyone," I said. "I'm stepping back, and I'm choosing peace." Melissa cried harder. "So you're abandoning us?" "No," I said. "You left me a long time ago. I'm just finally noticing." David's voice dropped into something colder. "You're not the person I thought you were." I nodded. "And you are exactly who I feared you'd become." That stung. I could see it. It was the kind of wound only truth could inflict. The room was quiet again. 3 adult children, all raised by the same woman, looking at her as if they'd never seen her before. 3 different reactions: tears, fury, sarcasm. And none of them asked why Evelyn had made it. Why an 82-year-old woman with arthritis and a limited income had understood something they didn't. Because if they asked, they might have to admit that love is not about wealth or convenience or appearances. It's about answering the call, even when the line is crackling, the hour is late, and you don't know if you have enough. But you show up anyway. They didn't show up, but Evelyn did. And that's the paradox that tore the silence wide open. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I didn't curse them. Though part of me, an older, angrier version, might have once wanted to. Instead, I just stood there, steady and quiet, as their voices faded, their protests turned to murmurs, and their footsteps finally left my home. Not a single backward glance. When the door clicked shut behind them, I didn't feel triumph. I felt stillness. Not empty, just still. I sat down, opened my notebook one last time, and wrote, "Money doesn't change people. It reveals them, and I have no room left for masks in my life." That was the last thing I wrote in that book. I closed it, bound the leather tight with its strap, and placed it in the drawer beside Frank's old reading glasses and our wedding photo. His eyes smiled at me from that picture, like he'd known all along that one day I'd need to see clearly. The next morning, I made the first call, not to any of them, to a small community college where Frank once taught night classes for veterans returning from war. Then to the children's wing of the hospital where I gave birth to David, and where, years later, Melissa spent a summer volunteering because she wanted it on her resume. I asked them both about their scholarship programs. I asked how many students had dropped out that semester due to bills. I asked how many mothers had brought sick children and left crying because insurance wouldn't cover something. I transferred the money in Frank's name. Every cent. The full $62 million, not a dollar to David, not a dime to Melissa, not a cent to Clara. They'd made their choices. So had I. The house was still mine for now. The mortgage was safe again. Evelyn's $3,000 had more power than all their silence combined. I tried to offer it back to her, and she refused with a firmness that made me smile. "Family helps family," she said again. "Now go do something nice with your peace." So I did. By 4 that afternoon, I was brewing tea, chamomile with a hint of lavender, just how I liked it, in the hours when the sun melted into gold and the air carried a chill that reminded me to breathe slower. I carried the cup out to the porch. Frank had built this porch in '79. He used to joke that it was the only vacation home we'd ever need. He was right. The wood creaked familiarly under my feet. I settled into the rocking chair he had stained himself, its arms still smooth after all these years. Across the lawn, the sun began its descent, like it was bowing out for a standing ovation. The phone buzzed beside me. "Hello?" I answered. "Hey, sweetie," came Evelyn's warm voice. "I've been thinking about you. Just wanted to make sure you're not lonely over there." I looked out at the light glinting through the trees. The breeze tugged gently at my cardigan. "I'm not lonely," I said, and I meant it. "I'm finally light." There was a pause on the line. Then Evelyn laughed softly. "You sound good." I smiled. "Silence," I whispered, "is sometimes freedom." We stayed on the phone a little longer, not talking about much. Just life, just memories, just presence. The kind of quiet conversation that only two women with nothing to prove can share. When we hung up, I didn't go inside right away. I stayed, letting the warmth of the tea soak through my hands, letting the stillness become my companion. And then I said it aloud, to no one in particular. Maybe to the wind, maybe to Frank, maybe to the part of myself I'd buried for decades under duty and denial. Only one person reached out to me, and that was enough. And just like that, like the final page of a long, heavy book, I closed the chapter, not with bitterness, not with regret, but with peace, and the rocking of a chair in time with a heartbeat that, at long last, belonged to me. Maybe you think I went too far, or maybe you've been there too. A moment when you realized the people you'd loved the most had no space for you when you needed them most. Do you think I made a mistake? Would you have done it differently? Have you ever been in my shoes? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes hearing each other's stories is how we heal, how we feel less alone. And maybe, just maybe, that's how we start again. Together.